All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to use hard data to completely shatter what you think you know about missing persons cases. We've all seen the headlines, right? The gripping documentaries, the dramatic TV shows. But today, we're going to strip away the fiction and look at the cold, hard facts, drawn from a massive, comprehensive study out of the University of Cambridge. So get ready, because the reality of missing persons investigations is radically different from what we've all been led to believe. So what actually happens when someone goes missing? When you hear those words, missing person, your mind probably jumps straight to a high-stakes emergency, doesn't it? You picture sirens, yellow police tape, search helicopters, a literal race against the clock to prevent a tragedy. But is that really the reality of what happens day in and day out? Or is that just a narrative we've absorbed over the years? Look, we're conditioned by true crime media to expect the absolute worst. We instantly imagine abduction, murder, severe danger. Yet the sheer volume of cases tells a totally different story. According to the National Crime Agency, someone is reported missing by the police every 2 minutes in England and Wales. 2 minutes! That's over 300,000 reports a year. I mean, if every single one of those was a true crime thriller, society would be in a constant state of chaos. To put that into perspective, the statistical reality hints at a much more mundane outcome. The vast majority are just returning home safely with zero harm. Let's move straight into Section 1, the 99% reality. To really see how this builds, let's look at this deep dive by the University of Cambridge into nearly 6,000 missing and absent person cases from the Thames Valley Police over a 6-month period. This wasn't just some small sample, you know. This was a comprehensive dive into police records and crime reports to figure out exactly what happens when someone vanishes. Now brace yourself for this data drop. Out of the 3,706 unique individuals studied in this dataset, only a microscopic 0.05% were known to have died while missing. That is literally just 2 people out of thousands. Now, obviously, every loss of life is deeply tragic, but from a purely statistical and resource allocation perspective, the immediate assumption that a missing person is in mortal peril, it's just entirely disproportionate to the actual data. And it goes even further. A staggering 99% of missing individuals suffer absolutely zero crime-related harm while they're gone. None. And even when researchers expanded their criteria to include non-crime harm, like, say, mental health incidents or self-harm, a massive 98% still suffered no harm whatsoever. So the numbers are incredibly clear here. Going missing very, very rarely equates to being harmed. Just look at the massive contrast here. You've got this huge visual weight on the side of complete safety, representing the 98.9% of individuals who experience no crime harm, compared to that tiny 1.1% who actually do. It completely flips our intuitive understanding right on its head. When we actually let the data speak, the whole narrative of constant extreme danger just kind of dissolves. Which brings us to Section 2, victims or suspects. So if they aren't getting hurt, what are they actually doing out there? Well, here is a highly counterintuitive twist regarding who is actually involved in criminal activity. As the numbers show, missing people are actually more likely to cause harm as suspects than they are to suffer harm as victims. The study found that 1 in 148 individuals were recorded as a suspect in a crime while missing. Compare that to only 1 in 275 individuals who were recorded as a victim. I mean, this completely challenges our default assumption of the missing person as this helpless victim. In a lot of cases, their disappearance might actually be linked to evading authorities or getting into trouble rather than being preyed upon. Now let's look at Section 3, the cost of intuition. If 98% of cases involve zero harm whatsoever, no crime, no non-crime issues, nothing, we have to ask a really difficult question. Why are police resources being stretched to the absolute breaking point for these incidents? Why pour so much time and money into cases that resolve themselves safely almost every single time? Well, the answer lies in how police assign risk gradings. You can see the official definitions here for high, medium, and low risk, plus that newly introduced absent category. High risk means there are substantial grounds for believing the subject is in danger, but these are definitions based on potential worst-case scenario danger. They're driven by subjective gut instinct rather than actual statistical probability. And here is where the disconnect becomes just glaringly obvious. Despite that microscopic actual danger we just talked about, officers graded a massive 84% of cases as either high risk, which was 16%, or medium risk at 68%. Only 13% were graded as low risk. So you end up with an outcome where 99% of people are perfectly safe, yet police are launching these massive, resource-intensive investigations 84% of the time. The low-risk and absent categories are just vastly underutilized because the whole system is inherently risk-averse. The crucial point here is that this overly risk-averse behavior creates a massive financial strain. The study estimated that the minimum annual police officer labor cost to Thames Valley Police alone, just to police missing person inquiries, is up to $5.5 million. $5.5 million. Compare that to just under $300,000 for absent person inquiries. When you're constantly throwing high-risk resources at essentially zero-risk outcomes, the financial drain is just astronomical. And you want to know something really surprising? The intuition driving these wildly costly assessments hasn't really evolved in nearly a century. Take a look at these typical questions asked by officers during missing persons inquiries back in the 1930s. What is the domestic background? What are the personal habits? They're almost identical to the frameworks used today. We are living in an era of big data, yet the initial police responses still heavily rely on this exact same subjective questioning they used before computers even existed. Actually, it gets wilder. The Cambridge study looked at the actual risk assessment forms filled out by officers. Now, you'd assume a high-risk case would require incredibly detailed, extensive documentation to justify deploying all those resources, right? Wrong. The data shows officers actually wrote fewer words on average on high-risk assessments than they did on medium ones. This strongly suggests they're relying on fast, intuitive gut feelings, rather than a slow, analytical assessment of the documented facts. All right, let's wrap this up with Section 4, a data-driven solution. Look, the current approach is just unsustainable. It's draining millions of pounds that could be used to fight actual crime. We clearly need to shift away from this costly intuition and toward a method that relies on hard evidence. We need to find what criminologists call the power few, that tiny fraction of a percentage of missing persons who are in genuine, severe danger and actually need saving. And the study proposes a really fascinating solution, integrating tools like the Cambridge Crime Harm Index, or CHI. Instead of just counting the sheer volume of missing people and treating every single one like a potential homicide, the CHI weights incidents based on the severity of harm, using recommended prison sentence lengths as a baseline. By adopting this, police can build a data-driven model to prioritize cases based on actual statistical severity rather than just trusting their gut. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on. When a life might be on the line, human instinct is to throw absolutely everything we have at it. But when the hard data proves that 99% of the time, no crime has occurred, how should we balance public safety with finite resources? Is it finally time to override our true crime-conditioned guts and let the data lead the investigation? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I really hope this changes how you view the very next missing person headline you see.